Please welcome to the stage, Eleanor O'Brien. I'm driving across the country, from Portland to Toronto, to premiere my brand new solo show. I had been living in New York City, and I had moved there to be an actor after grad school. And I'd been there about 2.5 years, and I had gotten exactly 0 acting jobs. I had auditioned many times for Law and Order or for regional theaters, but I never, ever got any work until I was cast as the title role in a kids' play called Baba Yaga, Little Girl Stew. Playing the role, if you don't know, Baba Yaga is a witch. And that actually was a familiar role to me. I had played witches before. I was normally cast as either witches or grandmothers or the chubby, funny best friend. And the exciting thing about Baba Yaga, Little Girl Stew was that it was going on tour to Canada. And it turns out Canada has this system of independent fringe festivals all across the country. And it starts like on the East Coast in Montreal in the early summer and ends on the West Coast in Vancouver. And I saw all of this theater, people, and mostly it was people doing solo shows and telling their own stories. And I was fascinated. I had no idea this existed. I saw this one man, his name was TJ Daw. He is a star in Canada, but you probably never heard of him. But he was just a master storyteller. And I saw him tell his story, and it was so funny and wise, and I thought, I want to do that. So I went back to New York City, and I took a class in how to write a solo show. And as part of this class, we had to make a list of all the things we ever wanted to do on stage. And the instructor encouraged us to really brainstorm, and you could be outrageous. So I wrote down things like, I want to juggle, and I want to yodel, and I want to do a tango, and I want to play a sexually confident character. And the idea of playing a sexually confident character was as outrageous as ice skating on stage. That was not something that I had ever done. Because I was not a sexually confident person. When I was a teenager, I was, like many of you perhaps, super horny. And I had 2 favorite fantasies that I would masturbate to, one of which was that I could freeze time and everybody was frozen except for me, so that I could have sex with people without their knowledge. The other fantasy was that I could become invisible so that I could have sex with people without their knowledge, like a ghost. And this was important because the idea of somebody finding out that I wanted to have sex with them was terrifying to me. It was because I knew that I was sexually repulsive. And the reason I knew that was because I didn't look anything like the women in my dad's porn magazines that I stole on a regular basis or on TV. I had small breasts, I was chubby, and I knew that no one would ever want me. So the only sex I was gonna get was if it was anonymous. And this really persisted through my teens and 20s. And in fact, if I was attracted to somebody, I found that I was literally unable to look at them. Like I would just turn away, and in fact, I would try to get far away. And when I would talk to my best friend about the crushes that I had, we had to use pseudonyms so that no one ever overheard. And I didn't lose my virginity, as you might imagine, until I was in college. I was 19, and it was to a man who asked. And first time. And he took me to lunch. And the reason I had sex with him was because I knew that he had had a girlfriend before me who was fatter than I was. So I figured when I took my clothes off, I would look thin by comparison. So this persisted through my 20s. And I did have sex with a number of men, but only men that expressed their attraction to me, not men that I was necessarily attracted to. And so I'm taking this solo show class, and I write that I want to play a sexually confident character. And as a part of the class, I had to tell a story about something that had happened to me. And so I ended up telling this story about the one day that I had spent training to be a professional dominatrix. I had answered an ad on Craigslist, and I thought that I could do this. Not that I had any history or experience whatsoever in BDSM, but I figured it was sort of like an acting role. It paid $75 an hour. It ended up being an utter disaster. Turns out I was a terrible dominatrix, and therein lies a hilarious tale. And as part of this show, there's like a 30-second spot of what I imagined a sexually confident dominatrix would be like. And she doesn't take shit from anyone. And when she walks in the room, she knows that every eye is on her. And I reveled in that 30 seconds of this sort of what I thought of as a superhero dom. So I write this show about this experience. And I come here to Portland, and I rehearse, and I do one performance here in Portland for friends and family before I head off to the Canadian Fringe. And as part of this show, as the end of the show, I announce that I'm starting my own religion of sexual permissiveness and inclusivity, and it's called the Church of Yes. And as the ending of the show, I invite the audience to get up and dance and join my church. And I do it here in Portland, and everybody gets up and dances, and they love it, and they think I'm wonderful. And I drive across country to Toronto, and I'm rehearsing, and I'm memorizing, and I get to Toronto on a Wednesday, and I meet my stage manager, who I've hired off of Craigslist, and she is, in fact, this is the first show she's ever stage managed. She's still in school for stage managing, and we open the next day, and what a strange kismet, I am sharing a theater with TJ Daw. And his show is right before mine, and there is a line around the block for his show. And then my show premieres at 9:30 on a Thursday night. And I come out on stage, and there are 12 people in the audience. And I do my show, and I tell my story, and the tech is a little wonky. There's at one point where the phone is supposed to ring, and it doesn't ring, so I just go ahead and answer, and then halfway through the conversation, it rings, that kind of thing. And then at the end of the show, when I invite the audience to stand up and dance, no one moves. And they all just look at me, and I'm like, hey, come on. And I gesture to this woman in the front, and she's writing on a clipboard. And I'm like, hey, come on, dance. and no one does ever, and the lights go down. And the lights come up, and I bow, and I turn around, and I burst into tears. And I know I failed. And the stage manager, she was so nice, she comes up and she pats me, and she's like, no, it was fine. And I know it wasn't fine. And the next day, I'm sitting in the performer lounge, and another performer says, hey, did you have any reviewers at your show last night? And I'm like, well, I think so, but I think that she was from The Eye, which was the weekly newspaper, but it doesn't come out till Thursday, so I think at least I have a week. And he says, oh no, they come out online. And so I go to the computer and I type in the name of my show, which, by the way, was Girls Guide, Dominatrix for Dummies. And the review comes up and is a 1-star review. And the opening line is unsexy, unfunny, and ill-prepared. And it is like all of my worst fears have come true. I'm not sexy, and I'm not even funny, and it looks like I wasn't prepared. And I am so devastated. I am alone in Toronto. I'm living in my van, and at that time in my life, it felt like the worst thing that has ever happened to me. But the beauty of writing a solo show is that you can rewrite it. So all that summer, I tour from Toronto to Winnipeg to Saskatoon, and I rewrite, and I keep trying to figure out what is going wrong and how to make it better and how to get the audience on my side and get them to stand up and dance. And in Winnipeg, I get a 3-star review, and a couple of people in the audience stand up and dance. And in Saskatoon, I get a 3.5-star review, and a few more people, almost always performers. And then I get to Vancouver. And the way the tour works, I'm there a few days early. And I'm at the Fringe tent, the Fringe beer tent, and I'm sitting there, and I realize sitting at the same table is TJ Daw. And we end up having a conversation in which I'm extremely nervous because he's like my hero. And he says something to me to the effect of, you have that character in your show, that kind of goddess Dom character. She's great. You should bring her back more. And I go back to my van, and I start writing. And I open the show with her. And she comes out, and she says, there are 3 rules. Rule number 1, you must keep your eyes on me at all times. Rule number 2, you will laugh when appropriate. And then I actually tell like a funny joke and people laugh, and then I'm like, oh, you may be rewarded. And then I say, rule number 3, the safe word. And then it turns out the safe word is bravo, and I make everybody repeat it. And then I do the show, and I tell this story about me being a terrible dominatrix. And then at the end, instead of starting my own religion, I have this character come back, and she does a seminar in radical self-lust. And she makes the audience put their hand on their heart and their other hand on their crotch. And then I make them repeat mantras like, I am so fucking special, or I am so especially fuckable. And then when I invite them, but I don't even invite them, I tell them at the end, get up and dance. And they do. They rise as one. And in Vancouver, I get a 4-star review. I'm telling you, it was a fucking journey. And then I come back to Portland after the end of this tour, and I know that I'm not gonna move back to New York. I know I'm done with New York. And I don't know where I'm going next. I'm like, maybe LA, maybe Chicago. But my folks live here, so I'm kind of, recuperating, and I end up going to this party. And it's a Burning Man decompression party, and I've never been to Burning Man, but I go anyway. Because I'm looking for friends. And we're all standing around in a circle, and we're having this conversation about pet peeves. And I say that my pet peeve is having people try to squeeze my zits. Like your mom comes in, my mom is here tonight, and you are terrible at this. She'll come into the bathroom and be like, oh, honey, just let me get it. I hate that. Just in case we ever end up dating, I hate that. And this man in the circle says, that's funny, I like that. And I turn and I look, and he is the most handsome man I've ever seen. I mean, he has the most brilliant blue eyes and this beautiful goatee, and his head is shaved bald. And I immediately look away. And then I think, I'm so fucking special. And I make eye contact with him, and I sustain it. And I say, oh, you know what that tells me about you? That tells me you like cunnilingus. And he says, I do. And I go home with him that night. And side note, I marry that man. And I would like to report to you that my self-esteem, my sexual confidence was magically reversed, and I had bulletproof self-confidence from then on. But the truth is, I did that show for the next 10 years. I toured it to Europe and all across Canada and America. And every time I went out on tour again after having not done that show for a while, I would go see a therapist. I went to a hypnotherapist. I went to an energy worker who taught me about my dantium, because every time I had to do that show again, the fear of having to play that character and believe those words that I was saying was so fierce that I needed to get help in order to be able to really embody that, to believe what I was saying when I said, I'm so fucking special and you are perfect just the way you are. Because it is scary. It is scary to step into that kind of confidence. I watched, a number of years ago now, Brené Brown's famous TED Talk on the power of vulnerability. Who here's seen that talk, right? If you haven't, so worthwhile. But what struck me about it was when she talked about people who have love and belonging in their lives and people who don't feel that they have love and belonging. The only difference is not, it has nothing to do with, their career or their relationships or their family life. The only difference between people who have love and belonging and those who don't is that people who do believe they're worthy of it. That's it. And when I heard that, I was like, oh, it's like acting. It's like believing, right? And so even now, you guys, even now, you humans, sometimes I'll be having sex with my partner, and I'll look down and I'll see my belly or my small A-cup breasts, and I will have those old feelings of, how could you want to have sex with this? and that's a total lady boner killer. And so I remember, and I recall my mantras, and I'm like, no, I am so especially fuckable. And I remember it really is all make-believe. And you may now use the safe word.